Ask your grandmother what dessert she made every single week in 1960. And I bet real money it's not a name you'd recognize off the top of your head. It's not chocolate chip cookies. It's not brownies from a box. It's something with a strange, almost forgotten name. Something that took real time, real skill, and usually showed up whenever the family had company or the church had a potluck. Somewhere between 1960 and today, an entire category of American dessert just quietly disappeared. Not because it stops tasting good, because life stopped having room for it. Today I want to bring a handful of these back, tell you exactly what they were, why they mattered, and why, one by one, we all just stopped making them. Let's start with the one I think most people have actually heard of but never actually eaten: Ambrosia salad. Ambrosia was a fixture at Sunday dinners, church potlucks, and holiday tables all through the 50s and 60s. The classic version was simple: canned mandarin oranges, canned pineapple, shredded coconut, mini marshmallows, and sour cream or whipped cream folded together into something between a fruit salad and a dessert, served cold in a big glass bowl that got passed around the table. Every family had a slightly different version, and every family swore theirs was the right one. What actually killed Ambrosia wasn't taste. It was the ingredients themselves going out of style. Canned fruit salad and marshmallow-based desserts became, over the following decades, a kind of shorthand for old-fashioned, unsophisticated cooking. The exact opposite of the fresh, made-from-scratch food culture that took over American kitchens starting in the 70s and 80s. Ambrosia didn't get worse. It just got embarrassed out of the cookbook. If you like this kind of trip back into the actual kitchens of the past, go ahead and subscribe to Back Home in America, because we do this every single week. Next up, and this one has a genuinely wild origin story: the tomato soup cake. Yes, tomato soup. A can of condensed tomato soup mixed right into a spice cake batter along with flour, sugar, cinnamon, and raisins or nuts. It sounds like a joke today, but the tomato soup added moisture and a subtle tang that worked shockingly well with the spices. And the recipe was genuinely popular, showing up in community cookbooks across the country through the 1950s and into the 60s. This one is a direct product of the canned soup boom. Campbell's had spent decades printing recipes right on the can and in company cookbooks, encouraging home cooks to use soup as an ingredient, not just a meal on its own. Once that specific marketing push faded and made from scratch became the standard of a good home cook again, tomato soup cake became one of those recipes people kept in a box out of nostalgia, but quietly stopped actually baking. Let's talk about the icebox cake, because I think this one deserves a genuine comeback. An icebox cake was built entirely without an oven. You layered graham crackers or thin chocolate wafers with whipped cream, stacked them up, and let the whole thing sit in the refrigerator overnight. The moisture from the cream soaked into the cookies until they softened into something closer to cake than cracker. And by morning, you had a genuinely impressive dessert that required zero baking skill at all. This was, honestly, one of the smartest desserts of the era. Perfect for summer when nobody wanted the oven running, and dead simple for a woman already juggling 3 meals a day, which we've talked about on this channel before. What actually pushed it out wasn't a failure of the recipe. It was simply that as more elaborate, oven-baked layer cakes became the standard for what a real dessert looked like, especially once boxed cake mixes made those layer cakes fast and easy too. The humble, no-bake icebox cake started to feel like the lesser option, even though, frankly, it's delicious. Now here's one that genuinely surprises people when they hear it: Watergate salad. Bright green, made from pistachio pudding mix, crushed pineapple, mini marshmallows, and whipped topping. Watergate salad showed up at potlucks constantly through the 60s and especially the 70s. Once instant pudding mix hit grocery shelves and gave home cooks a genuine shortcut to a dessert that used to take real effort. Nobody is entirely sure where the name actually came from. There are a few competing stories. But by the time it was popular, the political scandal had made the name itself part of the joke. A dessert nobody quite knew the real story behind. made with an ingredient, instant pistachio pudding, that itself represented exactly the kind of shortcut cooking taking over American kitchens at the time. This one didn't disappear because it was bad. It disappeared largely because the whole category, the pudding and whipped topping salad, eventually got lumped in with a style of cooking that fell out of fashion as fresh and clean eating took over the cultural conversation starting in the 1980s and 90s. We're about halfway through, and if any of these are bringing back a memory, a like on this video really does help more people find their way to this kind of history. Let's talk about the Jell-O mold, because I think no single dish captures the specific character of mid-century American dessert quite like this one. Gelatin molds, suspending fruit, sometimes vegetables, occasionally even meat in savory versions, inside a wobbling, colorful tower of Jell-O, were a genuine centerpiece dish for decades. They required a specific metal or copper mold, real patience while the gelatin set in layers in the refrigerator, and a fair amount of nerve turning the whole thing out onto a plate in front of guests, hoping it held its shape. Jell-O, as a company, spent enormous effort throughout the 50s promoting these molds as the height of modern, elegant entertaining. And for a couple of decades, it worked. What ended it, more than anything, was a genuine and lasting shift in what elegant was even supposed to mean. By the 70s and 80s, elaborate molded gelatin had become a kind of visual punchline for exactly the style of cooking a new generation wanted to distance itself from. And an entire genre of dessert, built around real skill and real presentation, got quietly retired to the back of the cookbook drawer. Here's one that almost nobody under 50 has ever tasted, and I think it deserves a real comeback. Date nut bread with cream cheese filling, sometimes called a date nut roll. This one wasn't really a bread in the way we'd think of it today. It was dense, sweet, packed with chopped dates and walnuts, often baked in a coffee can to get that distinctive round shape, then sliced thin and spread with sweetened cream cheese, sometimes rolled up like a pinwheel sandwich for a ladies' luncheon or a bridge club afternoon. It shows up constantly in church cookbooks and community fundraising cookbooks from the 50s and 60s, always credited to somebody's specific aunt or somebody's specific mother, because everybody's family genuinely believed their version was the one worth passing down. What killed it, more than anything else, was the disappearance of the exact social occasion it was built for. The formal ladies' luncheon, the afternoon bridge club, the kind of daytime social gathering where a hostess served small, elegant finger foods on her good china, quietly stopped being a normal part of American life as more women entered the workforce through the 70s and 80s and simply had less unstructured daytime hours to fill with that kind of entertaining. The recipe didn't get worse. The entire social world it was built for just stopped existing. Before we get to the last one, there are two more I can't skip, because they were genuinely everywhere. The first is the 7-layer bar, sometimes called the magic cookie bar, built by pressing a layer of graham cracker crumbs into a pan, then piling on a layer of coconut, a layer of chocolate chips, a layer of butterscotch chips, a layer of chopped walnuts or pecans, and pouring sweetened condensed milk over the whole thing before baking it into one solid, ridiculously rich bar. This one actually came straight off the side of the Eagle brand condensed milk can, one of dozens of recipes companies printed directly on their packaging to encourage home cooks to buy the product. And it worked so well that 7-layer bars became a genuine staple at bake sales and Christmas cookie trays for decades. The second is the classic icebox fruitcake. Not the dense, boozy, oven-baked fruitcake people love to joke about at Christmas, but a completely different no-bake version, built from crushed graham crackers, chopped candied fruit, marshmallows, and condensed milk, rolled into a log and chilled until firm, then sliced into pinwheel-looking rounds. It was a genuinely clever way to get the flavor of a holiday fruitcake without turning on the oven during an already busy holiday cooking season. And it shows up again and again in church cookbooks from this exact era. Both of these, like almost everything else on this list, ran on the same two ingredients: sweetened condensed milk, and a company recipe card that made a housewife's life a little easier. And both quietly faded for the same reason as the rest. Once made from a can, stopped being a selling point, and started being something to apologize for. Last one, and this is the one I think is the biggest genuine loss. The icebox pie. Specifically, the kind built on a graham cracker crust with a filling that's set in the refrigerator rather than the oven. Chocolate, lemon, or the classic key lime. These pies were everywhere in the 50s and 60s, precisely because they were forgiving. No fussy pastry crust to get right, no risk of burning a filling in the oven, just a simple crust, a simple filling, usually built around sweetened condensed milk, and time in the refrigerator to set. A woman with 3 meals to cook every day, as we've talked about before on this channel, could put one of these together in 20 minutes and have a genuinely impressive dessert ready by dinner. What happened to it is, honestly, just the passage of taste. As boxed and later frozen desserts became widely available starting in the 1970s, and as the home baking culture shifted toward more labor-intensive, authentic desserts as a kind of point of pride, the simple, practical icebox pie started to feel like cutting corners rather than what it actually was, which was smart, efficient, delicious cooking built for a woman with limited time and a family to feed. Here's what I think ties all of these together, and it's worth sitting with for a second. None of these desserts disappeared because they stopped tasting good. Every single one of them vanished because the culture around cooking changed what counted as impressive, what counted as modern, what counted as a sign that you were a good home cook. Ambrosia and Jell-O molds got replaced by fresh fruit and elaborate scratch-made cakes. Tomato soup cake and icebox pie got replaced by the idea that real cooking meant starting from raw ingredients, not a can. None of that is wrong, exactly. But I think it's worth remembering that the women making these desserts in 1960 weren't cutting corners. They were being resourceful, feeding families well with limited time, and building genuine traditions around food that, frankly, a lot of us have never actually tasted. And there's something else worth noticing here, which is how much of this list runs through just a couple of companies. Campbell's Soup, Eagle Brand Condensed Milk, Jell-O, and later instant pudding mix show up again and again, not because home cooks lacked imagination, but because these companies spent decades printing recipes directly onto their packaging and in mailed-out cookbooks, actively teaching an entire generation of American women how to cook with their product. It worked. It genuinely shaped what dessert meant in millions of households for 20 or 30 years. And then, just as deliberately, the culture moved on, and an entire shared vocabulary of dessert, one that used to need no explanation at any potluck in the country, slowly became something you have to describe to your own grandchildren. If your family still makes any of these, or if there's one we didn't mention that showed up at every gathering you went to as a kid, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. These recipes are exactly the kind of small history that disappears fastest, because nobody thinks to write down a recipe everybody already knows by heart, until suddenly, nobody does anymore. If you want more of this, the real, honest history of how Americans actually lived and ate, subscribe to Back Home in America. There's a lot more of it waiting to be told. Thanks for spending this time with me. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.